housekeeping. First of all, thank you everyone for being here this afternoon with us. The structure of this event will first be introductions, then a program with Anita Rodriguez, and lastly, time to take questions and comments. If you have any technical difficulties, feel free to write your concern in the chat box and I'll assist you there. To ask a question or make a comment, please feel free to raise your hand. There's a little raise hand symbol to be unmuted, so you can ask yourself, or you can type it in the chat box or that Q&A box and I'll ask for you. We will address the questions and comments at the appropriate time. Douglas, you wrote, if you should be able to see participants. Right now, this is a webinar, so you will not see any of the attendees, just me and Anita. Let me start with some introductions. Anita Rodriguez is an American author, artist, and painter. You can see behind us both some beautiful work of art by Anita Rodriguez. Her work incorporates Native American ceremonialism, Mexican mysticism, and Hispanic folk art, as well as the Penitente art of New Mexico, Native American dances and ceremonies, and Catholic traditions. Please welcome Anita Rodriguez. Anita, feel free to unmute yourself and you may begin.
Okay. Okay, here's a question about the penitentes and the Matachine devotion. The penitentes are a very tender subject in northern New Mexico and always have been. It is a very secret group of people who have a long history here. There are several books that have been written about them. But as a member of the community of Taos, when it comes to the penitentes, I like to maintain a very high degree of discretion. One of the things about them that I can talk about, though, is that they produced an incredible body of work that can't justifiably be called art because it is religious art, devotional art. So it has a meaning beyond art, which is meant just to be enjoyed in a public way. And these objects have been stolen over time because the penitentes, being a secret sect, attract a lot of attention around the turn of the century and during the Mabel Dodge era here in Taos. And so people actually broke into their churches, which were called moradas, and stole this art, which has ended up in collections all over the West. And now, along with a lot of other ghosts that seem to be emerging from the American soil, the provenance of these works of art is now arising in a public way, and there'll be going to be some discussion about this. The Matachines, the Matachine dance is one of the few dances that is performed, or the only dance that I know about that is performed at both Native American and Hispanic villages. And there's a very important book written, in fact, by my sister, Sylvia Rodriguez, Professor Emerita of Anthropology at the University of New Mexico, called The Matachine Dance, in which she discusses in depth the whole history and the manifestations of this dance as it occurs in many villages across northern New Mexico, including Taos. It's not performed every year at the Pueblo, but in a lot of the other villages, a little bit south, it is performed frequently. Are there any other questions? Let me see here. Questions. stories.
Yeah, Sally wrote into our email, and the first question or comment is, I love your paintings and your Coyote in the kitchen, a gift from your Texas cousin, Margaret Harmon. The story of your grandfather and the bear are terrific images and stay in my mind. Can you talk a little bit about your grandfather and the bear?
My grandfather and the bear. Well, first I have to tell you that John Nichols, who wrote the introduction to my book, met me in the post office just after his book, Milagro Beanfield War, came out. And he rushed up to me and he says, Anita, whatever you do, change the facts, change the dates, change the names. You can use the same stories, but fix it so nobody can think it was them. So some of these stories are embellished. And so the actual participant was not the person in the book, but the event did take place. And the stories about why he became such a ferocious man because of his encounter with the bear were true. And Sostenes, he really lived. And he was from Picuris Pueblo, actually.
Thank you. There's another question. I would love to know how you developed your knowledge of the movement in a skeleton.
Well, actually, just by doing it. And it looks really hard, but it's a lot easier than you think. If you hold up your arm and twist your wrist to the right and the left, you will notice that the shape of your arm changes, right? Every time you move your body, the muscles move and the shape of your arms and your legs, your torso change, but the bones never do. The bones are always the same. So in a way, they are much easier to draw. And it was just by practice that I learned to do it. And of course, I studied books on anatomy and was very observant. And I have plastic replicas of skeletons, which I used. I have an actual skull in my house that I can use and turn to different angles. So it was a mixture of observation and practice. A whole alphabet of the skeletal type. You mean the letters of the alphabet in the shape of skeletons?
What was your first shaped canvas and what made you create this style?
It was strange. I can remember the actual day when I became a painter. It was 1989 and it was Christmas Eve. And I was very sad because I was going to spend Christmas alone. My daughter had just left for college and I was still in the construction business. And I thought, wow, damn it, if I don't do it now, I never will. So I found a box of pencils that she had left behind, colored pencils. And I began drawing. And the work sprang out like Aphrodite from the head of Zeus, fully matured and grown. The palette was already there. I worked frenetically for 3 or 4 days until I was exhausted. And then I flopped down on the bed because that's what happens when you really get into art. You get into the flow and you forget everything. You don't want to eat. You don't want to answer the phone. You don't want anything to interrupt you. I flopped down on the bed and this sort of movie went on in my head. That was all of the paintings that I have in me or that are in this place I connect to when I get into the flow. And they were all there. The dimensions, the colors. And so it's, I think, somehow a connection to some collective reservoir of images and symbols that just goes on and on. And so that's how it happened. And then, of course, with practice, I got better and better and faster and faster.
What was the first color you put down?
oh, I can't remember, but it was probably orange or pink. I love magenta and the color orange. I was really little. I must have been about 4 years old, because about 3 years old, because my eyes were on the level with a table. And my parents had taken me to a studio of one of Taus's artists. I think it was Bert Phillips, because of the windows. Anyhow, the palette was there in front of me, just a few inches from my nose. And there was this gorgeous clump of vermilion or orange or some marvelous hot color. And I knew I couldn't eat it, but I wanted to eat it. And I promised myself that when I grew up, I was going to buy a lot of paint.
I'm so glad you did.
Oh, so am I.
So have you always been such a deep observer, storing up all the things in your consciousness?
I think so. And I think that part of that just comes from growing up in Taos, because there was so much to see, and observation was a survival technique in a community that's as complicated as ours, that has like at least 3 standards for etiquette and morality and for everything. So as a child, you had to learn, when you cross these invisible barriers from one culture to another or one language to another, you had to be observant so that you didn't get punished or screw up or do something humiliating.
That makes sense. Thank you. Let's see. How do you know when a piece of art is finished? Is there a stopping point where you know that the work, your artwork is complete?
When I really like it. When I really like it, and it's almost a sensation. It's almost physical and palpable. Like sculpture, it has to do with weight and balance, composition, and contrast. There's a point at which it's just viscerally satisfying. And you know in your belly that, yeah, it's finished. But that doesn't happen very often, to tell you the truth. I remember that someone told me that Monet used to sneak into the Louvre and touch up his paintings. And no painting is safe with me if it stays too long, because I'll look at it and I'll say, oh, and want to change something. And if I really don't like it, I'll paint it out. I'll get rid of it.
You'll paint it out, like you'll cover the painting and start
I'll
it.
cover it with gesso and start all over again.
Wow.
Just not to waste the canvas.
Of course. What's the longest it's taken you to create a piece of work, and what was the quickest you knew you were finished?
Well, the longest probably was, well, the painting behind me is 6 feet long, right? And so size isn't necessarily a barometer of how long it takes, because it's also a function of how much detail it is. But I think that a painting about that size would take me about 3 months. And so, you know, that would be the longest I would spend on a painting. And then the shortest, oh, I don't know, maybe I could do a really small landscape in 3 or 4 days, but it's really not fair to say any of that, because I like to work on several pieces at the same time. So if I get stuck on one, I don't agonize and, you know, overwork it or underwork it. I can skip to another one. And also, it's also really satisfying to finish 4 or 5 paintings all at once. Then I can have a gloat. I can line them all up and just look at them and feel like a really good woman and, you know, dutiful, and that I have earned my oxygen and the space I take up.
Thank you. You speak so beautifully. Uh, Sally wrote that I saw on Facebook when you started the family scene painting and then painted out a whole area and then put it back in as if it was untouched. Fabulous knowledge and so fluid. That confidence is so inspiring.
Well, it comes, you know, with just years, I guess, let's see, 40 years, you know, of using a brush. I am more confident. So it flows more easily and it's more fun. It's like drugs, sex, rock and roll, and chocolate all at once. It's a gift.
Oh, I love that.
It's truly a gift. It just makes me happy. I paint to get well. I paint to escape this incredible world that is such a mess. I can paint a place that's much safer. Like the painting behind me, I'll get out of the way. Let's see, where can I go? I mean, wouldn't it be nice to be there?
And an anonymous attendee wrote, was there a painting that chased you for some time before it fully made itself known to you what it wanted? If so, do you have a good story about that?
I have 2 paintings that happened to or with. And one was a painting that was good in a lot of ways, but there was just something wrong with it. It just didn't work. And I kept it for years. And then I sold it, and the buyer wanted to trade it for another one, so I got it back. And then one day I painted a huge red shoe in the middle of it. I don't know if I can even bring it up on my screen. Let's see. No, I can't, because I'm not an administrator. And so it became, I think, the painting of a core complex. And the red shoe is the story of a little girl who was very poor, and she lived in the woods and she sold firewood to make a living. And she had nothing, but she had a pair of red shoes that she herself had made out of scraps of red cloth that she had found here and there, even going through the trash. And so one day she was selling her firewood, and a wealthy woman came by in a golden carriage and whisked her away to a mansion where she could have all the shoes that money could buy. And the woman said, let's put those tacky red shoes in the back of the closet. You can have any that you want. But she missed them. And so one day she and her patroness were at mass, and they were leaving mass, and they walked down the steps of the church, and there was a little man there who had a pair of red shoes, and he held them out, and she just couldn't resist. And he said, do you want these shoes? Here, put these on. So she put on the shoes and she began dancing, and she couldn't stop, and she danced through the churchyard and through the village and into the woods, and was never seen again. And so that means if you have a talent and you don't develop it and you don't nourish it, it will come back and bite you in the ass, because our gifts don't belong to us alone. They belong to our community. We're just like pipes. The art flows through us. We're born that way, I think. Like queers, it's not a choice.
Thank you. You have many talents. What art came first, writing, painting, or is it all in you?
It was just this kind of synesthetic experience that, whatever there was, I wanted to make something. I mean, it was architectural. I remember when in the fall, when the leaves would cover the lawn, I would take a rake and I would draw an architectural plan in the leaves. And I would have, I would change the rooms and rake the leaves back and forth. And I'd have a living room and a bedroom and a fireplace. And later on, when I was about 16 and saw an architectural plan, I instantly knew, oh, of course. Why didn't I think of doing it on paper? And so it was just that way with everything. And my mother was an artist. And my mother sewed, she made our clothes, and she used watercolors. She designed our house. She was just very creative. And so there were art materials lying everywhere. And I played with them. And storytelling, I was born on the cusp of an oral tradition. My father was a famous raconteur. He was a really great storyteller. And he knew his culture was just about to be lost. And so he was full of stories. And so, all of these things added up. And then there were so many things to tell stories about. The plaza where I grew up was a stage of cultural confluence and conflict, where at least 3 cultures came together in this uneasy but beautiful, complex dance. So there was a lot to make up about, and a lot to, I liked to make up stories.
Unintended wrote, could you please talk us through that gloriously spectral and complex painting behind you?
Oh, that one. I call it Voices of the Land. And I ordered these panels by mistake, these long, skinny panels. And I thought, well, what can I do? I have to use them. I don't want to send them back. So I just started painting on the left-hand side first. And I was thinking about Tlaloc, who is the Mexica god of water. He's always blue. And you see there are children that are leading the procession, if you can call it that, as the water pours down from the sky and fills the arroyos and rushes forward in a flash flood. They're running and they're wearing leggings like Mexica dancers do. And then behind them come the adults and the horses, but the horses are also in the clouds. And so maybe it's a creation myth. I don't know. Sometimes a painting will be years old and a stranger will come up and say, oh, that's about thus and so. And I'll say, you're right. I didn't realize. So you see these creatures on the right, they're sort of quasi-human, but they have wings and they looked as if they're raising their hands towards the sun, because in this painting, it is night and day, and it is raining and the sun is shining. So actually, I don't know what it's about.
Well, it's absolutely beautiful and thought-provoking. I love it. And I'm so happy you were able to make use of the mistaken purchase of panels, but you put them together so wonderfully.
Well, it's like a mural, right? And there are other panels, I just thought, well, I've got to stop somewhere. So, those are stored somewhere and they'll probably keep going. But I realized that I could paint a mural that I could tuck under my arm and carry with me. And so, this would be a mural I could put in a restaurant or a bar. And when the building is sold, the mural doesn't have to be destroyed or go with the building. You can just pack it and take it home.
Hmm. It's so smart.
By accident.
um, As a question, and I apologize if I mispronounce, is there a relationship between your work as an enjarradora and your painting?
Well, there's a relation. Enjarrando is about architecture, right? Enjarradoras were the finishers of architecture. And we were the ones who were responsible for the final shape, for the subtle curve of a wall or the placement of a nicho, the way a fireplace throws light into a room. So we were very conscious of architecture and space. And one of the ways in which that is transferred to the painting is in the way I paint nichos. And a nicho is basically a box with doors on it. And you paint the outside of the box, outside of the doors, and you open it up and there's another painting on the inside and on the inside of the doors. So it's kind of like two paintings in one, but it also has the same effect as walking in from one room to another. And you know how everybody has this experience and it increases as you get older. I promise. You go from one room to the next and you forget why you were in that room. Everybody knows that sensation. Well, it's been documented somehow that there is actually some effect that takes place when you walk from one firmly delineated space through a doorway into another space. So when someone comes along and opens up the doors to the nichos, they are in the palm of my hand. They have agreed to believe my story. And whatever I put on the inside of the nicho for a minute, they're there. And so I use these nichos to talk about parallel realities or double states of consciousness. For instance, on the outside, I may paint Las Posadas, which is celebrated during Christmas holidays in the villages of northern New Mexico, and people go to mass at midnight mass, and then they make a procession through the village at night, through the snow with their candles. They go from house to house singing songs. And so that's on the outside of the nicho. You open up the doors and on the inside is a crypto Jew family looking out the window to make sure the Catholics can't see them lighting the menorah. So this enables me to talk about all of those situations in our culture where we have to hide who we really are in order to fit into the mainstream. And now it has become so we all have to hide who we are in order to fit into the pinche mainstream.
Thank you. Sally wrote, I am very concerned about real estate development and the end of Asiquia culture. Is the culture protected in any way? It's a sacred type of protection.
What was the last part of the production?
Is it a sacred type of protection?
A sacred type of protection. The only protection there is local political organizing. It all comes down to politics. This is a global phenomenon. It isn't just real estate in northern New Mexico or in Venice or in many of the other places whose indigenous cultures or original cultures or even existing cultures are being threatened by gentrification and by the invasion of urban people who know nothing about the environment that they're coming to. This is a global phenomenon. And the only way we can fight it is locally, to organize in our own towns and our own villages and cities, because our cultures are different. You can talk about American culture, and from one end of the country and one side, one north, south, east, and west, there are many different cultures. So each locality has to devise its own way of protecting what it has, its cultural and human ecology.
Thank you so much. Maggie writes, do you have another book or two you're working on?
Yes, I do.
You do?
Well, I have a bunch of projects going at the moment. I always do. As I just finished saying I had to become politically involved because I'm very concerned about what's happening to my culture. But I've been writing for years, and I have a huge folder filled with half finished stories, 3/4 finished stories, 90% finished stories. And those are in the process of being organized. And eventually, they're going to end up in at least 1 or 2 books. Also poetry, short stories, possibly even a novel. So there's a lot of stuff in different stages of completion.
Thank you. Sounds like similar to your painting style.
Yeah, there's a rhythm. I guess all artists have it, a rhythm to our creativity. Like we have our fallow periods, and we really doubt ourselves during those times. Oh, I'm not producing, I can't write, I can't paint, and then you get back into it again, and you realize that all the time that you thought you were fallow, there was seeds germinating under the surface. It was like when I started painting at the age of 47, mind you. I had been painting all those years that I had been climbing scaffolding and running my construction crews. I'd been painting in my head. I'd been collecting images and internalizing them and making up stories about them and arranging them in a composition.
When did you decide to write Coyote in the Kitchen? What inspired you?
Well, like I say, I've always been writing, and it's like I have all of this material, and it's just a question of really kind of like organizing it and editing it. And I thought, well, gee, what can I use to put together a bunch of stories? Somebody said 250 pages. That's good. Okay, how can I put? And I thought, how can I tie together all of the different parts of my life? Oh, food. So I used food and recipes as kind of like a container for just a few of the stories that I have in me. Sometimes I feel like a theater on fire, filled with actors that are scrambling over each other to get out before it burns down and tell their stories.
Thank you. What authors and artists have most influenced you and your art and your practice?
Oh, I read voraciously, and I read in 2 languages. And so and I'm always reading new stuff. So I guess the latest, I'm still digesting the impact of having lived in Mexico for 15 years and running out of English books in the first 6 months and just being desperate. So I've got to bite the bullet, and I became a fluent reader of Spanish and began to immerse myself in all of the literature in that language, and just gorged on that. So that was, like, oh God, Paco Taibo II is really one of my favorite writers. Elena Poniatowska. I'm not crazy about Octavio Paz or Pablo Fuentes, but Losa. I mean, I can't remember this huge inventory of this bibliography that I have between my ears. Painting, once again, I think it was the Penitente art, because when I was really young, we had a 1941 Studebaker. And so my father on weekends would drive all the way around Taos to all of the little villages. And because he had a business on the plaza, he knew everybody. And so we'd stop everywhere and talk to people, and he would take us into the moradas, where I saw the santos and the Cristos and all this incredible art. And don't forget, I was just like 4, 5, 6 years old. And this art has really powerful impact. So that really influenced my painting. I still use the retablo shape. The nicho is a folk arts shape, so that was one of the influences that. And then I grew up around the Taos painters, right? Ufer, Sharp, Bistrom, and I was taken to parties. I was a cute little girl with pigtails, and they took me to all the cocktail parties. And so I got to see the art. And so then when I was 16, I went to Mexico City, and there was Diego Rivera and Kahlo and Siqueiros and Tamayo. And so my eyes continued to gorge. And I think that once you see something, you cannot unsee it. So it's all in there. And sooner or later, it pops out.
Thank you. You can see yourself in your paintings. Even sometimes you look maybe like a skeleton, but you definitely see your eyes, your hair. Is it intentional to paint yourself in the paintings? And what is the importance and significance of
Well,
that?
I've only done about maybe 3 or 4 self-portraits. Actually, that's one way in which I have painted myself, very rarely. I'm thinking of doing it again. But all paintings are paintings of me. Just like all stories are my stories, or the stories of whoever tells them. I don't think there is any way you can deny that creative work is a part of you and doesn't in some way reflect you.
Yeah.
Or some significant experience. I did have a death experience, which is a significant thing, I think, in the fact that I like to use skeletons. I actually was medically dead and made the decision to return.
Wow.
I remember the occasion. I was in an ambulance, and the nurse asked me how old my daughter was, and I said, "Oh shit, I got to come back."
Oh, wow. It's amazing.
And that actually was when I began painting. I started by doing skeletons on napkins, because I would go out where people dance, and I would sketch on napkins skeleton dancers. And those, blossomed into the paintings.
That's very cool. Thank you for sharing that. So I did make you co-host if you'd like to share your screen. Starbird wrote, "Could you share another painting with us? Your storytelling is very palpable in Voices of the Land. I can hear the voices of the land and elements singing through the beings depicted on the canvas in a glorious harmony."
Okay, let's see. How do I do that? I go to share screen.
Yes.
Okay, share screen. Oh, all right. Let's see now. All right. Files. I don't really know what I'm doing here, but maybe I'll figure it out. Computer audio, PowerPoint, content from second camera, video, basic. Actually, I would love to, but I don't think I can figure out how to do this.
Okay.
Let me try another.
While Anita looks at that, most of you, I'm sure, already visited, but AnitaRodriguez.com. You'll see more of her brilliant work and articles and her other talents that we haven't even mentioned yet. So I highly recommend checking out AnitaRodriguez.com.
Jessica, according to my computer here, only the host can share. And only you can change that.
Okay. I will make you host, Anita.
Okay. All right. Now let's see.
Okay.
So try share screen. I still don't have access to my files. Pity. What else can I do here?
Oh, there you go.
Well, this is a poem, not a painting. You want to hear the poem?
Yes, please.
Overlapping, interpenetrating, mutable, and layered. Transparent stories dance past my windows, weaving yesterday's new woof on today's ancient warp. Trees twirl and twist in the invisible arms of the whistling wind, sucking green leaves, brittle, rattling, brown, scatter cracking the earth's scorched skin. For 12,000 years, it was never so dry. Medicine birds tap on the bark of my thirsty tamarisk, its migrant roots burrowing blindly into Turtle Island's dry dirt, searching for warm, wet Nile mud. Birds who never sang in Egypt clean the stranger's wooden wounds like adoptive, chattering relatives. From among the flowers and candles on my altar, a clutter of memories, faces, and charms, my beloved dead watch me cook, waiting, a crowd of eyes, a fiesta of stories, a flock of giggles, a parade of funeral feast, a rosary of hungry eyes I wept to see one more time. Once upon a time, from my pillow, I could see 200 miles to Peña Blanca in Colorado. The coyotes bent their ancient trail around my solitary house in the middle of their nowhere and just kept walking, laughing, tittering, and howling. All those people are dead now. And on every window, carefully placed to frame the perfect landscape, a stranger's house is glued. Sometimes I forget to feed them, so something always drops to the floor, reminding me of eyes that witnessed clean rivers, snow up to our knees all winter, acequias brimming with sweet snowmelt, brilliant night skies glittering over open, empty land, rolling, rolling, hundreds of untouched miles, all the long undulating way to the San Juans. So I think that, there's no way I can get to the paintings. I don't think, let's see. No. Anyway.
Thank you for sharing that poem. When did you write that?
Oh, yesterday.
Wow.
I'm taking a poetry class.
Oh, wow.
So
I was going to ask if you would teach a writing or poetry class.
Oh, I wouldn't feel I have done that before. Yes, I guess I would if I could do it by Zoom.
And Donna asked if you are in Mexico, but I believe you are in Taos.
I am in Taos.
And that is your home.
Yes, I built my house here with my own hands.
Sally asks if you have recordings of your stories. Have you ever made an audiobook of your work?
Well, that is forthcoming. I have a genius webmistress who is going to rebuild my website. It's going to take a little while because, there's a lot of things on my plate, but there will be audio recordings. And one talent that I have never had the opportunity to develop, feel very frustrated, is that of an actress. And I love to read. And my house is very dramatic. So we're thinking that by firelight on the portal, I can put on all my jewelry at once and really read some really interesting stuff. So stay tuned. My main platform, the place where I photograph my paintings in progress and sell them, my gallery, my political platform, my personal column is my Facebook page, Anita Rodriguez. All the bad things that they say about Facebook are true. But there's the story of the traveler who came to the city and asked the imam, what kind of people live here? And the imam said, well, what kind of people live in the city you came from? Oh, they're awful. It's nasty, backstabbing, jealous. I hated them. Well, that's what they're like here. You better keep going. Another traveler came, asked the imam the same question, and the imam returned and said, well, what are they like in the town you came from? Oh, they were lovely people. They were so kind. I hated to leave. He says, move in, you'll find everybody just like that. So that's kind of like Facebook. You know, if somebody bugs me, I unfriend them. And I have 3,700 friends. I have founded 2 nonprofit organizations through Facebook.
That's wonderful. And Sally wrote, I follow you on Facebook and it is rich.
Yeah, you can do good things with Facebook, you know, and I hear Facebook is crumbling, you know, like the stock is falling, and, you know, using it has become really crazy. I have an impersonator on Instagram. Do not answer anything you get from me on Instagram until my web mistress cleans it up, which is like an unbelievable number of bureaucratic hoops. They sent us a letter saying, it's going to take a while because of COVID, meaning everything is in chaos.
No.
Oh, yes. It's only going to get worse, so cheer up.
No. And Margaret writes, are there any existing or will there be any future high quality printed art books of Anita's paintings?
Well, I am presently going to meet with some publishers. I am thinking of 2 books. One would be kind of like a really glossy, high-end book of the images of the paintings themselves. And another would be a book that would be a compilation of the articles I wrote for the Taos News Tempo over a period of slightly more than 2 years. I wrote a column twice a month, and in each one provided with my article a color photograph of an original painting. So I would like to have that published. The articles were directed towards the invisible population of Hispanics here in New Mexico who have been erased somehow from the historical narrative and barely appear in any of the local publications and merely as sort of like stage props. Anyhow, I wrote the articles for and about that population, and I would like to have that published. I need to raise the money to do this, to publish an inexpensive book that can be collected and kept by local people, not all of whom have a lot of money and are certainly not going to go spend a bunch of money on a glossy coffee table book. So those are the 2 most thought about prospective publications at the moment.
Thank you. And I so appreciate your thoughts on keeping it accessible. Art books are very expensive, and I know at the library we have to keep them in locked cases and only use in house because they're so expensive. So it's so thoughtful of you to think that way and make art accessible.
I used to be an abstract expressionist painter, and I observed from the time I was a child sort of how the art world works and how art ends up being inaccessible in every possible way to poor people. And so I tried to develop a painting style about which no one would ever say, my kid could do that. I want both highly educated people who, for instance, can can have read about pre-Columbian history, Jungian psychology, and the history of the Southwest can see all of those elements in my work. It's full of intellectual chew toys. But at the same time, the symbol, there are bilingual jokes and puns and symbols that are deliberately accessible to all people. Everybody has a skeleton. They are kind of like the quintessential democratic symbol. Unless you're a forensic anthropologist, you can't really tell if it was even male or female, let alone rich or poor or what race. The only thing you know about my paintings is that they were human.
I love that. Thank you. Are there places in our community and Taos community or elsewhere that you have your work installed that people can come view it publicly?
No, I don't show in any local gallery or any gallery at all. I don't need to. I think the art business has really shifted to the web. My studio is accessible by appointment only.
Thank you. How does one get a reading from you, Anita Rodriguez?
Okay, I read for people all over the world. And what you do is you deposit $50 in my PayPal account, which is Anita Rodriguez at yahoo.com, same as my email. And then we make an appointment. You figure out the time zone, because like I say, I read for people from Finland and England. You figure out what time, and we agree on a time. And I photograph your cards and email them to you about an hour before the reading. And then we read over the phone. It takes about an hour.
And do you gain insight as well when you do other people's readings? Does it empower you individually as much as it does the other?
I think it's kind of like my mitzvah. And therapists will tell you this. There's a certain level upon which therapists and nobody really knows how it works. And that is certainly true of the tarot. The minds, because it had to have been more than one because of its incredible brilliance and depth and breadth, the minds that figured this out had access to some kind of collective knowledge. Some people might call it the Akashic records. I don't know. But the process is full of mystery. And I have learned that people who come to me serendipitously, and therapists have repeated this to me many times, the people who come to those of us who are consultants reflect a lot of our own issues. And the trick is to learn not to project, but to see in others and to witness with them an experience you have both had. It's uncanny how many times people will call me up and start telling me my story. So that's one thing. I read once, I was living in Mexico, and I read for a huge website called Keen that was bought by AT&T. It's a multi-million-dollar website. All you need is a credit card, and you can get an astrologer, a tarot card reader, a palm reader, whatever. And some of them are charlatans, and some of them are incredibly psychic. And I would read sometimes during Christmas season for 30 people in one day. I was also trained in Mexico, where I learned to read the cards in a taller or a shop that was on one of the busiest streets in an industrial city in Mexico, where we had a continuous stream of Mexicans coming in to have their cards read. It was a santeras site and have other things done, people of all classes. So I had the chance to immerse myself in that state of mind from which one reads the cards. And I learned that there is another order composed of so-called coincidence and serendipity that is the real map. How many times in your life has something happened and you thought, oh God, what terrible luck. Now I have to start all over again. And then you end up in a better place than you would have been if you had actually been in control. Anyhow, it's a mystery. It's a mystery, and it enriches me and it blesses me. It illuminates for me by mirroring all the multiple facets of the human psyche, because we're all connected. The biosphere is one huge sentient being of which we are the atoms.
Thank you so much. You are so inspiring. I could listen to you talk forever. And we've just had such positive comments and feedback in our chat. I want to read a couple for you. The mystery is the grace. What a great talk, Anita. I can't wait for a reading. Let's see. Bam, what clarity, excellence, mastery working. What full and rich life you have lived. Grateful that I'm in the right place at the right time to be part of this past hour. And I agree, Anita Rodriguez. We are all so blessed to be with you. A million times thank you for providing this program for your community. I also must thank the Friends of the Santa Fe Public Library for sponsoring this event and making this time possible to have Anita Rodriguez speaking with us. Everyone be sure to check out anitarodriguez.com. Also check her out on Facebook. She's doing the good work, fighting the good fight, keeping culture alive and blessing us all with all her many talents. Thank you so much, Anita. And thank you to everyone for being here.
And thank you so much, all of you, for being so kind.
Everyone stay safe. Check our calendar for more of our events like this. Be well. All my best, Anita.
Thank you, Jessica. And thank you, everyone.